Hello and welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. My name is Owen Fitzpatrick, and today we're going to talk about the art of confident vulnerability. Confident vulnerability, I hear you say. How can you be confident and vulnerable? See, I can't even confidently say confident vulnerability without making a mistake. How can you be both confident and vulnerable at the same time? Well, that is what this episode is all about. And what I want to do is talk to you about both terms and why I use the term confident vulnerability, why I think it's such an important term to use, to leverage, and what difference it can make to the way in which you interact with others. When we try to come across as leaders in our organizations, or when we try to come across as the most effective people we can be, as persuasive as we can be, whether you're a coach or a consultant, whether you just want to be able to impact people more effectively in your everyday life, whatever it is that you do and whatever situations you find yourself in, one of the things my guess is that you want to be more persuasive. You want to be more influential. You want to make more of an impact with your communication. And being confident is one of the most crucial skills that you need to develop and that you need to practice. The more confident you are, the research suggests, the more persuasive you will be. Now, that should not be so. Just because you're confident doesn't mean that you know what you're talking about. But nonetheless, people do find that the more confidence that they exude, the more likely they are to get other people to say yes. Vulnerability itself has been studied by the work of Brené Brown, and she's written some excellent books about being imperfect, about vulnerability, about being brave, as she calls it, brave enough to be vulnerable. And in our work, and in a lot of work around this area that's become popular over the last few years, the notion of vulnerability is seen as something absolutely essential because it's an integral part of authenticity. It's about being yourself and letting people see the real you, letting people see that you're not perfect. And this both allows you to build trust with them, but it also allows you to be able to encourage them to be vulnerable so that you can forge a deeper bond. You can connect at a deeper level. And it empowers them by making them feel like they're doing okay, that they don't have to be perfect. Somewhere along the line, there came about this idea that when you're presenting yourself to other people, you need to have everything perfectly together. You need to be perfect. You need to come across perfect. With this approach or attitude, it meant that we're constantly striving to let everybody else know how well we're doing, how great we are, how effective we are. When you're vulnerable, it shows people reality. It shows people the truth. And we are starving for the truth, especially in the modern world. So when I say confident vulnerability, I'm talking about combining your ability to demonstrate this level of confidence in a way that doesn't negatively impact how likable, for example, you are. And at the same time, you're balancing it with being vulnerable, being authentic, being real. So let's dive into confidence. What kind of confidence do we want to exude and what kind of confidence do we not want to exude? And then we'll look at vulnerability afterwards and explore a little bit about how we do that as well. First of all, with regards to confidence, there's a number of different terms that we tend to use around this topic of confidence. And coming from Ireland, we have a notion in Ireland, I suppose notion is the right word, where when someone is too good or doing really, really well or very, very confident, we usually use the term, they've got notions. And this idea is that they've got notions about themselves, ideas about themselves. This is also seen as begrudgery. We begrudge someone who is doing really, really well. And oftentimes we don't like it when people are too successful. Now, that is a big generalization. And obviously there's many Irish people that are not like that. But it's not just Ireland. It's also the UK experienced this as well. In a number of European countries, they experience this. In fact, all the way over in Australia, right, over in Australasia, they have a term called the tall poppy syndrome. And in Japan, there's a saying that says the biggest nail stands out the most and gets hit the hardest. I might be butchering that sort of phrase, but generally speaking, I think I've conveyed the meaning. And this notion of us, the more popular we are, the more successful we are, and especially the more confident we are, that being a bad thing, that has led to quite a lot of challenges for a lot of people because you don't get rewarded for being successful or being confident by the people around you. And as a result of that, what tends to happen is because we value, and this is the other side of it, we value humility quite a lot in Ireland. It means that when it comes to confidence, we kind of don't like to come across too confident because we're worried that it will come across as arrogant. So let's define what arrogant actually is so that we can remove that misconception from our vocabulary. Arrogance is when you think that you're better than other people, and as a result, you disregard them. So you think that you know everything or you're the best, and as a result, you disregard and disrespect other people as well. Smug is kind of like a quieter form of arrogance. It's that you believe that you're better than others, you're sort of self-congratulatory, and you sort of disregard other people in that way as well. Maybe not as obviously as you would do when you're arrogant, but nonetheless, being arrogant or smug is something that nobody wants. And I want to point out that in both situations, there's two crucial differences between being arrogant and smug versus being confident. Being arrogant and smug both involve believing, number one, that you're better than everybody else, and number two, that they don't matter as much as you. You're disregarding them as a result. And they're important distinctions from confidence, which doesn't really say about how good you are compared to others. It's more so how good you are. How good do you feel without making this erroneous comparison to other people or without falling into the trap of disrespecting or disregarding other people's value at the same time. There's also egotistical and selfish. And egotistical is really when people are focusing on how great they are, sort of a cousin of arrogance, if you will. And selfish means really considering or caring only about what you want. And then there's self-absorbed, which is not so much being selfish as in not just caring about only what you want, but being very much focused on yourself. And it's important to make these distinctions because it's okay to be self-focused here and there, especially if, for example, you've got an organization and you're the main person in that organization. Like if you work for yourself and you're a service provider, then you could be forgiven for being a little bit self-absorbed because your entire work depends on you being able to promote and market yourself. So what that suggests is that you will be thinking quite a lot about yourself. You may well be self-absorbed. Being selfish, though, is the actions you take. And then being egotistical is focusing on how great you are and wanting to always talk about yourself and how incredibly impressive that you are. So we want to be able to identify these different definitions because when you start to take things like being self-absorbed and you start to differentiate it from being selfish or egotistical, when we start to take confidence or even assertiveness, which is confidently standing up for yourself, and we separate that from being arrogant or smug, we give ourselves permission to be confident. We give ourselves permission to be assertive, and we give ourselves permission to occasionally focus on ourselves. What's important, though, is that when we give ourselves permission to be able to do this, we allow ourselves to accept that culturally, we have to recognize people are not all going to respond in a favorable way. So if you are confident, even if you're not arrogant or not smug, still some people might be very quick to perceive that as arrogance or smugness. So you have to be clear for yourself what the definition means. You have to know what is it that if you did it, that would be smug or that would be arrogant. What kind of thoughts, what kind of actions would move you more into that category as opposed to the confident or assertive category? What would make you more selfish? What would make you more egotistical as opposed to just being self-focused or self-absorbed every now and then? It's really important that you get those definitions clear for yourself and you get those examples clear for yourself so you can be comfortable in the knowledge that you're doing what you need to be doing, that you're presenting or positioning yourself in the best possible ways. You also want to know that sometimes, depending again on the culture, confidence can have an inverse impact on likability. So the more confident you are, the less likable you can be in certain places. And also the more likable you can be, or the more likable that you are, the less confident you're perceived because once again, it's easy to win you over. It's easy to get you to do whatever somebody else wants you to do. It's easy to walk all over you. So what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to recognize how any of your confidence might be negatively impacting or inversely impacting your level of likability. You want to be very clear over how do you come across when you're confident? How do you come across when you're assertive? How does that fit in general with the culture? And it doesn't mean you allow the culture to stifle you, but it's critical that you're able to demonstrate confidence, demonstrate assertiveness, but at the same time, minimizing how much this might negatively impact your likability. And that might mean balancing it out with likability. Likability is a quality of you being likable, obviously enough, and you're able to cultivate a sense of likability by anything from being nice and kind and smiling and being friendly and remembering information about the other person and asking questions and being genuinely interested in other people that you speak to, in sharing stories with people, in being yourself and being real and being generous. Those are all examples, in having a bit of a laugh with someone and having what we call in Ireland the crack, or a bit of banter with someone. All of those are ways to be able to cultivate a sense of likability. Now, when you're likable and you're confident, that minimizes the likelihood that people will misperceive you as being arrogant, especially if those likable traits are more things like generosity and kindness and focusing on the other person. So I say all of that so that you can get some sense as to how to more effectively present yourself confidently without negatively impacting your likability. And once you have this sort of approach of confidence, and again, confidence is something that you will exude through your body language, right? When you occupy lots of space, your shoulders are back and relaxed, your posture is up straight. There's a certain fluency about your movements. You feel calm, composed, confident. When you're speaking effortlessly at the right kind of pace, and you're speaking with resonance and with impact, and you're structured and you know what you're talking about, and your thoughts are well organized in how you're communicating them to other people, and you're able to encapsulate a sense of calmness in the way in which you deliver your message. All of those are examples of nonverbal and what we call paraverbal or voice connected forms of confident communication. Let's talk about vulnerability. If you're demonstrating the kind of confidence that you want to, and you're doing so in a way that you're comfortable, that it's maintaining a sense of likability, then we have to look at the notion of vulnerability. And as I mentioned, this is being popularized quite a lot by the work of Brené Brown, when she talks about being imperfect. And the more that we can own up to the fact that we're imperfect, and the more that we can allow people to see our vulnerabilities, the more we provide ourselves with the wonderful opportunity to be able to build a deeper connection with them. We want people who are human. We want to be more connected with other people. We want to be more trusted, and we want to trust other people more. And being vulnerable allows you to be able to do all of that, because vulnerability, although for a long time it was seen as this negative quality, you're vulnerable to threats. Being vulnerable in this context, as we think about it, is really about coming to the table instead of with all the answers, with more of the questions. Being clear about what you don't know as well as what you do know. Being on the one hand able to explain what your weaknesses are, but on the other hand to be able to explain what your strengths are. It requires self-awareness and the ability to accept whatever is imperfect about you and to be able to share it whenever it's necessary. Now, this doesn't mean that you're constantly telling people all the things that are wrong with you. Nobody needs to hear all of your self-hatred out loud. But what it does mean is that when you're allowing other people in and you're allowing people to see that you got questions, and then you're allowing other people to really get to know you properly, then what that means is you're showcasing authenticity in its truest form, because you're being honest about who you are, what you know, what you can do, and what you can't do. You're being honest about the information you have at your disposal and the information that you don't. And when you do that as a leader, when you do that as a consultant, when you do that as a speaker, when you do that as any form of communicator, people will appreciate it and respect it a lot more, and they will trust you even more. Dr. Robert Cialdini, famed for his incredible book, Influence, which has highlighted the 7 most important principles of influence, talks about how it's important for you when you're using, let's say, vulnerability in your communication with someone, that you use it before you demonstrate your authority. So whenever, in the research that he conducted, whenever you demonstrate vulnerability or something that is imperfect about you, you share a weakness or a vulnerability of yourself, and then afterwards you share something that builds authority, as he would say, builds credibility. People are significantly more likely to believe whatever you've said that builds credibility and authority if it follows that vulnerable example. So when you share the things that are imperfect and then you share all the things that are great about you, people are significantly more likely to believe the things that are great about you because you've just shared what was imperfect. And so vulnerability is something that is a very, very important quality to cultivate and develop and practice. And the way we practice it is simply by allowing other people in, allowing other people to see that the areas that we don't have everything figured out, and making it so that we're comfortable with that. And sometimes people resist this because they think to themselves, well, the other person needs to see me as perfect because that's what they're hiring. But they're hiring a human being. And obviously, you want to show them that you know what you're talking about. Obviously, you want to show them that you're great at what you do. Obviously, you want to show them that you're extremely confident. But at the same time, you also want to show them that you are human, that you're real, that they can trust you, that you're not coming across pretending everything is perfect or everything is a certain kind of way. And when you share with them your vulnerabilities, it can be game changing for your relationships. You'll also find that using self-deprecation can be very effective. Now, self-deprecation can sometimes undermine your confidence, so it's important for you to use it at the right context at the right time when you're trying to balance things out. But when you're being self-deprecating, what's important is that number one, you make it about something real about you, some real weakness that you have. Number two, make it so that you're joking about yourself. But the important elements to self-deprecation is that you ensure that you're joking about yourself. So you're not taking it seriously. You're mentioning some sort of flaw, but you're able to laugh at it. When you're able to laugh at it, you take the power away from it, and it shows a lack of insecurity in relation to that particular quality. You also want to make sure you balance it with expertise and experience. So at the same time as being self-deprecating, you also want to share examples of you in terms of what you're good at and what you're great at, what you're effective at. So you're not just saying, oh, I'm so terrible at this. You're also pointing out the areas that your strengths exist in. And you want to make sure that you're thinking about it contextually. So how can you deliver the right kind of communication that gets across the message that says, look, I might not be perfect, but I've got these things that I need to work on, these things that aren't exactly the way they need to be. But this is where I'm really good and this is where I'm really skilled. This is where we then get to the notion of confident vulnerability, because confident vulnerability is such a crucial skill to master. And it really is a skill because on the one hand, you're ensuring you're coming across confident. And on the other hand, you're also showcasing your vulnerability. And in many ways, you can be confident about your vulnerabilities. And so what that would look like is that as you're describing to people the various different things that you're not good at or the various different answers you don't have, you're confidently communicating that to people. You're saying, look, we don't know this information. And as you do that, you're demonstrating confidence. You're demonstrating security. You're demonstrating strength as you describe what gaps you have in your knowledge or what things you most need to work on. When you start to do this, you transform the way in which people perceive you. You create a totally new and more impactful and more empowering impression in the minds of other people. Because what you really want to do is demonstrate the credibility, which confidence suggests, but also the humanity, which vulnerability suggests. When you start to communicate to other people, where you are on the one hand demonstrating confidence, and on the other hand, fully aware of your foibles and flaws and the things that aren't perfect. And when you communicate that to other people, not only will you build more trust, not only will you deepen the connection with other people, but you'll also create the impression that you have massive amounts of composure. And composure is really the ability that we have to be calm under pressure. When you're able to demonstrate that you're comfortable with your flaws, that suggests a form of composure, which again stands to you quite significantly. So confident vulnerability is one of the most useful things you can start to practice. I really do hope that you will start to practice and apply it today. For now, I hope you found this useful. My name is Owen Fitzpatrick. May you continue to be confidently vulnerable. May you continue to believe better. And as always, may the force be with you. Bye for now.